1995. I'm Dr. Gerald Finkelstein interviewing Mrs. Marge Jayson at our home. Today is February 15th, 1995. It's Gerald Finkelstein interviewing Mrs. Marjorie Jayson for the World War II project, which is part of the project of the Hastings Historical Society. As a footnote, Ms. Jayson was my 6th grade teacher, and we've been friends ever since. Okay, before we start going, maybe you could tell me where you were born, about a little bit about your earlier childhood, and then ultimately how you came to Hastings.
That has to do with...
No, this is just background material. So we just have a little perspective.
I was born 90 years ago in southwestern Pennsylvania, in a county that was known for raising sheep and Democrats. And it was a center of the oil and gas industry in that part of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, you know, is square over here.
Yes.
And this little county was right in there.
I see.
And it's called Greene County.
And how long did you live there?
How long?
Yeah.
Well, I guess until I moved to Hastings. I
When you
taught across the state, say. I was one of those teachers that when I first started to teach, I started to teach in a one-room schoolhouse.
Where was that?
Same place down in Greene County.
Oh.
And then I started to go to school at the Indiana State Normal School, but Indiana was in Pennsylvania.
Oh.
And it was a 2-year course, see. So after that, after I graduated from then, I started in to do piecework, I suppose you'd call it, at the University of Pittsburgh. And I would get a job, you know, and while I was working with some professors at Pittsburgh University, they were interested in starting special education for slow and retarded children. And they thought I'd be good with that because I was patient.
And you were.
Something like that. Well, I started out after I got credentials enough to be able to teach things. I came into Columbia. They advised me to come in here to Columbia because there was a good program in there working with all crafts and things to be taught to the slow and retarded child.
Approximately what year was that? Would you place that?
I'd have to go
back. How old
back.
were you at that time? Can you give me just a full estimation?
Well, I graduated from Indiana State, I know that, 1927. So it was between 1927 to 30. And so I started to teach this slow and retarded children. And at the same time that these professors were trying to get this started, there was a movement among the educational people, other educational people, that they should not be separated from normal people, see. So,
what they call mainstreaming today.
So I started out at Arnold, Pennsylvania. Then I went to Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Then I came down to, now the name's gone. Right now it'll come in a minute. Outside of Philadelphia.
Yes.
And at each time, I'd be there just a year, or maybe a year, and they decided to do away with it
Mhm.
because they were going to put it up. And of course, that was the beginning of the Depression.
Mhm.
So they were cutting back, and this was one of the things they could cut back. And so one day my dad was talking to me about moving so much and getting farther away from home, see. And I said, well, you can just laugh if you want to, but I'm not going to be doing this all my life. I'm going to New York. So in 1934, I came to New York,
Oh.
and I've been here ever since.
Where'd you arrive in New York? When you first came to New York, where did you settle? Right in Hastings?
Yeah.
Not in this house, though?
Huh?
Not in this house?
No.
Where'd you live when you first came here?
With a Mr. and Mrs. Post on Hillside Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And I met my husband in 1934 because I had promised a friend who was going to be a head counselor at a camp in Massachusetts that I would go and be her crafts instructor, which I did. And the owner of the camp said, when we were talking, now when you get there, report to Gerald Jayson. So I did, and I've been reporting ever since. So that's how I landed here. 1 year from the day I met him, I married him.
Where did you live? Where did you live at that time after you were married?
Well, our first year of marriage was in the post house, the third floor on the post house on Hillside Avenue. And then we moved over to Old Broadway. And then from there, here.
At what point did you start teaching in Hastings?
1934.
34.
With the special class.
Right.
And I had it for, I think, about 6 or 7 years.
Yes.
And then they decided to do the same thing, see?
Integrated.
And then they made that system where they had the high, medium, and low.
Yes, I remember.
Remember that?
Surely.
And so I went into the lowest grade, or lowest section of that. And then I don't remember what it was, how I got moved up to 5th and 6th straight.
It would be at the time I was in 6th grade, I believe, because that you still had the special education class off on one side, but you were still, at that time, you were making a transition to our class, I believe.
Well, good for your memory.
So where were you living when World War II started?
Here.
On Villard?
We moved here in 1940.
Oh, good. Now, getting more closely to World War II related items. During the war, what sources of information do you think you used the most to learn about what was happening?
Well, my husband was what are called a warden, and I don't know what I was called, but every time the siren sounded for a blackout, I had to run from this house to the municipal building to be a telephone operator.
More what I was directing my question to was, in order to determine the course of the war, did you use newspapers or was the radio important? The general, how did you learn generally what was transpiring during the war?
Oh dear. Well, I do get most of my information from reading, so probably that's...
Newspaper.
And Jay was very much the same way, and we always had the New York Times.
Yes.
And there was many other magazines and so on, and we were both partial to Mr. Roosevelt. And, well, I don't know what else to tell
Radio
you.
didn't serve that big a role for you then?
I beg your pardon?
Radio was not that significant.
No.
Excuse me a second.
Whether it was being conducted the way it should be or not.
Were you ever discouraged about the progress of the war? Did you feel like it was never going to end? Did you have that kind of feeling, or you just took it philosophically?
Well, I thought the people who were running it knew more about it than I did. I remember my husband getting a little bit upset that something wasn't done, but then I don't remember what that was. You've got to put in here somewhere that I'm 90 years old and my mind isn't like it used to be.
You're doing great. Did you have any special feelings about either Germany, Japan, or Italy?
It left me... I don't have many biases, if any. But it takes me a long time to warm up to a German. Regardless.
Was that prior to the war or during the war, as a result of the war? As a result of the war. You didn't have any relatives in either Germany or Italy?
No.
Did you have any feelings during the middle of the war how long it would take to end?
How long it would take?
How much longer the war would continue to go on?
No.
I'm not taking any chance on target. That's so strange why it didn't go down. Okay. How did your family life change as a result of the war?
How did what?
What was the biggest change in your family life activities as a result of the war?
My immediate or my entire family?
Your immediate family.
Between Jay and me?
Yes.
No. We seemed to agree and work together when whatever we were supposed to be doing. He didn't help much with the Victory Garden. Of course, he was city-born.
Did your finances get modified as a result of the war?
I don't remember that. We didn't suffer in any way.
In general, would you say women's roles changed significantly during the war? Could you describe how?
I think I was aware that they found out, it seemed to me, I remember thinking, well, now they'll find out that women can do more than be at home in the kitchen or something. And that some of their crafty things helped do the technical things in the factories and so on. It seemed to me I remember that and thinking that now the women will change. I don't know, and I think they did. But just whether the war was the urge or whatever you want to call impetus that set them off, I don't know.
Do you remember any special roles that women played beside working in the industry as a result of the war?
Yes, the women fought their way into airplane. We have one woman here and lives in Hastings who was a pilot
Oh, really?
in the United States. Oh, she still belongs to an organization that they have reunions every so often, and it's completely women, and they were used for transportation.
In the civilian,
Yes.
I see. In other words, she became a pilot because so many of the other pilots
But
had been drafted.
she's rated as part of the armed services.
I see.
I don't know what would be their category, but I know that they had to go through quite a bit of training and, of course, learn to fly and handle an airplane.
Is she still around in Hastings?
Yes.
Who's that?
She lived, now you ask. Chris Lent.
Pardon me?
Chris Lent.
Lent?
Christina Lent.
And she's still in Hastings?
She lives up, let me see what road. Lives up here, farther up on the hill.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
She
good.
belongs to my church, is how I happen to know her. And she's the only woman pilot that I know.
Oh, that's interesting. What happened to the women when the men returned from the war? Those women that had been working in industry, were they able to keep their jobs? Did most of them go back to their homes?
Jerry, I don't know.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about what you recall about rationing, what items were rationed, what things were in short supply?
Was that the part we lost?
Yes.
Was the only thing I remember was like baking materials and the tea and the coffee, and because it wasn't vegetables, because I
Yeah, I do.
had my victory garden,
Right.
but
Could you tell me some of the things you grew in your victory garden?
yes, it was mostly green vegetables and corn, tomatoes, things like that. And you asked me if I canned them, and I said yes, I did.
How much of your yearly needs did you supply with these victory garden cards? Half? Quarter?
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Did you notice there were significant shortages in the markets when?
I'd hear other people griping
Yes.
that they couldn't get this and they would like to have that, and it wasn't available. And I could remember when we had to go over to the school, I guess to get our tickets or ration books, you know,
Yes.
how the people would fight that they had to have, you know, this, they just couldn't live without it, and usually it was something like coffee, or
The school distributed the ration books?
you had to go over there to pick them up,
How-
sign up for them.
How often?
There was a period that each year, I still have one of my ration books too,
Oh.
and it was supposed to last you for a certain time, and then they call you back to issue another one, and so on.
Did people who were friends frequently exchange or make trades with other people for ration? Where they weren't specifically in your name, they were just general stamps, but you could give it to somebody else or somebody could give it to you. They were exchangeable.
Mostly it was me giving away tea and coffee. That's the thing I remember mostly.
In your opinion, did women's clothing change very much? Hair, household furnitures, and anything as a result of the war?
Household furniture. And as I told you before, it was, if it were now, if we would have called it recycling our clothing,
Yes.
using what we had. And
Making do. Did you have to repair a lot of things because it was hard?
mending things that could be mending, have the shoes
Mhm.
resold or whatever. they call that.
Where did you shop in the village?
House Market and A&P.
Well, there were other grocery stores in Hastings at that
Hmm?
There were other additional grocery stores in Hastings at that time, weren't there? But those are the ones you used. Which scarcities would you say were the most noticeable?
What guys?
What things were most scarce on the market?
Well, gasoline was rationed.
Mhm.
I remember that, but I don't know how much or how
Yes.
often or what you could get when you went to the, seemed to me that 5 gallons or something was in my head that you could get, was a small amount.
Did that interfere with plans you might have had otherwise? No. Um, did you ever have to make special, pay extra, as in black marketing for any particular items?
No, we were too much the other way. We wouldn't have done that. We would have done that.
Done without. How did you manage with the scrap drives? How did that take place?
Well, if we had anything, we would contribute it. But mostly is metals that I remember.
And they were picked up regularly, or you had to tell people?
You asked me that before, and I don't really remember how it was collected. I remember about, for bandages, when they would call for, worn out sheets or things like that, It would help to make, I would help to make sometimes. There would be one of the churches that would.
Did you go there regularly? Is that an activity that, how often did you go? You do?
Whenever they called them and I was able to go, and then I did.
That was sponsored by the American Red Cross?
It may have been.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I just know that most of it, I did most with the church, but when they'd have these bandage
Yes.
making.
Was there any particular activity during the war that you could say stands out more than any other activity?
That I was involved in?
You and your husband.
Well, I was pretty much filled up with school and what I could do out of school hours. But
Did you participate in any Hastings civil defense activities, such as being an air raid warden or courier? Could you tell me about it?
you want me to repeat about running
Yeah, you have to.
running whenever there was an air raid in nighttime or late afternoon after school was over, where I was supposed to be at the municipal building to answer phones.
That would be.
And I had to run.
Yeah, actually, and that would be only during those times you were not in school, when you were in the house. Wow.
And I had to sleep with my clothes so I could quickly get into them and dress and run and get down there before the air raid struck.
Where did you go?
Hmm?
In the municipal building, did you say?
Municipal building.
I see. And you handled the phones. Were there extra calls, special calls coming in at that point?
I guess they just had it set up in case there were, say,
Well,
that something had happened close by and they wanted to warn. I don't know why they had that up. I don't even remember.
Did you remember receiving any calls when you manned the phones?
And then I was to call somebody. I mean, transfer it. But I don't remember. It seems to me that there was chief of police.
Do you remember actually receiving any calls when you were operating? In other words, the air raid wardens wouldn't call and routinely do that phone. This was for
No,
special
there would be
emergency.
somebody else on the phone who would receive their report.
I see. But you had another role. What was your role? Somebody.
Just answering and passing it to somebody that
I
was...
see. Could you tell me how you handled the air raid drill if you were at home? If there is.
If I weren't,
When you were at home, you and your husband never stayed at home. You both, he was a warden and you worked down there. So you.
because most of them that I had was involved in was at nighttime.
Mhm.
And many times I wondered if I could find my way from here down to the municipal building in pitch dark.
Yes. And the whole village was totally black, dark. Tell me how you handled the air raid drills in school when you were a teacher during classes. What was the
Well,
procedure?
get them lined up quickly when we got the signal and get them to understand they had to be perfectly quiet and where we were going and why we were to go. And then we'd move down to the lowest floor of the building and we usually lined up against the wall, one right in front of each other, and then try to keep them calm until we take care of them.
Were the children frightened during these drills? Were the children noticeably frightened during these drills?
Girls mostly.
And how would
They're crying,
Mhm.
but the boys would, we'll get them if they come,
They were
something like that.
aggressive, more aggressive. They weren't that frightened.
No.
Did that change after a while? Did the children get more accustomed as more drills? That
You didn't have to do much, well, keep them in line. They just seemed to know it, and then after they'd done it a few times, well, it wasn't as frightening.
Then you didn't have to change your home or apartment, your home here as a result of this, because you did not remain home.
I was not quite,
You didn't remain in the house during the drills, so you didn't have to make any
all
changes.
lights went out, of course.
Yes. Were there any special civil defense activities related to school other than drills?
Other than that first aid course that we had to take. And of course I mentioned about the getting the ration tickets for food.
Were you obliged to take the first aid course, or was that voluntary?
No, we all were supposed to take it. Some I think, I remember one person that they excused.
Why was that?
Well, I don't know why, but they just didn't think she would be much use. She'd be impediment to anything.
Yes.
That was her nature.
Do you recall any special wartime parades?
No.
Or any special activities honoring servicemen and when they return?
No.
Did you remember anyone in Hastings that was opposed to the war?
Did I what?
Recall anyone in Hastings that would have been that actually expressed opposition to the war at any time?
Oh, I knew there was, but I didn't know him personally. You know, that, of course, anyone who was against Mr. Roosevelt
Was not.
and anyone who was related to, well, I'd say the Germans or something. But I didn't know him personally. I would hear this in Boston.
Would you say the sentiment in Hastings was such that they were suspicious of people whose families were in Germany? That they were of German descent?
No.
No?
I never knew of it.
Uh, Could you tell me a little bit about bond drives?
Well, the only way I know about that was that I would go from house to house and give them the speech and find out how their feeling was.
How about school children? Were they ever requested to give contributions?
Well, yes, we had, what do we call it? No. Anyway, we'd save pennies, things like that, you know, to either give to a bond drive or, let's see, what was one of the things we did? But I remember that we did. We didn't very often, but of course kids didn't have much to contribute.
Oh.
But it was just the idea that they could help in some way.
So they were participating.
And I don't remember where we turned the money in, but I know.
Did the village change in any way during the war as a result of the war?
You mean my personal opinion?
Yes. You notice?
Yes, I know there has been a change, but I can't tell you what I mean by it.
Did you notice
There's been a social change.
Would you say that there was obviously far few men around in the town during the war?
There are what?
Were there fewer men in the town? Did you notice that as a result of that was
You mean during the war?
during the war? As a
Oh,
result
yes.
of
You know, that there were, especially the younger men and the older boys in the school. Did your class? There were quite a few
Yes.
that had to wait for their diplomas.
Because they enlisted earlier.
What?
Because they enlisted earlier? Yes.
Do you have a list of those?
No.
Somewhere I have. I think I gave that to Ann Chastain, or Ann Snippet.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask her.
That's the class.
Yes, quite a few people from my class did leave.
I know, I didn't know whether you wanted on that. That's the class that has stuck to me all these years. And I had a letter from one of them at Christmas time, wanted to know if I was going to stick around for your 50th anniversary.
And I hope you are. I certainly hope you are.
Well,
1 year from now.
I don't know why, but that class has stuck with me all the way through.
During the war, we used to take at least our class, our sixth grade class, every year you'd take us over to Playland.
But every year, even after you left sixth grade,
Oh, yes.
until you graduated.
And then some. Did the village, do you recall any special celebration after the war?
I don't remember today.
Were you a member of any social club during the war?
Any what?
Social club, any special club that you might not have belonged to otherwise?
I don't think I... I don't remember when I joined the Women's Club. It was a long time ago, I know that. And some of the other clubs were later on.
How did their role change during the war?
Hmm?
How did if you were in the women's club, did you recall any special kinds of changes that in their activities as a result of the war?
I don't think I was in the Women's Club.
How did your recreation habits change during the war? Things, in what way did your recreation change during the war? Were there things you would have been doing that you couldn't do? Or what would you say was your principal source of recreation or entertainment during the war? Summer, did you have any place to go swimming?
Summers usually, but not during the war, but we always left Hastings in the summer. Either traveling or to my home or be counselor of a camp or something like that. But I don't remember that during the war.
So you weren't able to do those things during the war? The camps did?
I don't know whether, no.
You didn't have the camp because of all kinds of problems. Now, did you go to movies frequently?
What?
Did you go to the movies frequently?
That brings back something. I won a bond.
You won a bond?
Up at the Dobbs Ferry, and I didn't have nerve to go up and pick it up. I had to have my husband.
At the Dobbs Ferry movie house?
Yes.
Oh.
It was something, I haven't thought of that ever. $25 bond.
You, based on it was a raffle type thing, your ticket?
Oh, ticket.
Yes.
Bond, you know.
Did you walk to Dobbs Ferry or did you drive?
Who thought of?
Remember?
No, we probably drove.
Did the movies have special propaganda messages? Do you recall? Do you think the content of the movies changed
Other
during the
than
war?
this thing of the bond.
Yes.
That's all I remember.
Do you remember any special activities to promote the war effort, to raise funds?
Other than the bond drives, that's all I know.
Did you take any vacations during the war?
Let me see, there was
1942 to 1946.
42, is that it?
Mm-hmm.
40 to 42, is that the years of the war?
41 to 40, let's see, December 7, 40. Yeah, it would be basically 42 to 46.
42 to 46.
45, excuse me. That period.
Other than maybe, to take a train to go out to my home in Western Pennsylvania.
Did you have trouble getting tickets?
I don't remember that.
Was there a significant number of servicemen on the train, more than you would normal?
Crowded, usually. I remember one time we went down to Lancaster, Pennsylvania for Christmas. Of course, we couldn't go out to my home for Christmas. And we stood part of the way because it was crowded with returning soldiers or those that had leave,
Yes.
to spend their Christmas.
Did the servicemen have priority for seating on the train?
Yes.
And yet, even as a woman, that they wouldn't stand up to let you sit down, that still was a priority.
Most of the time, it was the men that stood. And the women were still seated, but once in a while it was crowded enough that everybody stood.
Yes. Do you recall about these general categories about health in the village? Do you remember whether there was a shortage of doctors or dentists in Hastings?
I don't remember because I was healthy then.
Did you ever have to use a hospital during the war?
Did I what?
You ever have to use go to a hospital? Did you have any trouble getting medications for your family?
No.
Okay, now, this is something that's more related to excuse me, education and religion. How would you say the classroom activities or curriculum were affected by the war? Content?
Well, we had our course of study, our curriculum laid forth, and we did the best we could with that, and then would weave it in with, what do you call it, news items that were coming, kept up what was going on, things like that. Not the ones, or I'm only speaking of my own class. I never talked about anything that would frighten the youngsters or anything like that. But they kind of like to know what the soldiers were doing, especially the boys.
Would that be a general portion of the day? Would you have a specific period of time that you would discuss it? The social studies period. And the children, what was their response related to these things during the war? How did they deal with it? Do you remember?
Well, I'd have to say that it was according to sex. The girls would seem to go to the nursing end of it. We'll want to know who was taking care of the soldiers that were wounded. But the boys were wanting to get in there and fight.
Even at that early age?
Yes. Well, boy, that's a good age. Down in that part where they, or it seemed to me they do, and they do yet. Double up their fists when something's not pleasing with them. But that's all I remember. But
did any of the students you had have older siblings that were involved in the war, particularly males that were in the service or expressed concern that you remember, and that were parents that were drafted?
I just have one special story about one of my students that was in the war.
What was that?
Connie de Castro. Do you know Connie?
No.
Turn that off for a minute. What do you want?
Tell me about, you had mentioned that you had a student that looked red that went into the service. Could you tell me what happened? How do you manage to
You want
get
that first part of it too?
Please.
How he wanted to enlist? Well, how shall I start it then?
How do you get, if he was partially deaf, how do you get into the service?
By lip reading.
By lip reading. And they didn't detect that. Would they have taken him otherwise?
Well, he was all, he fooled them by lip reading, and they didn't pick it up on the first enlistment. See? Then after he had been in the Army, or in the armed service, for a long time, he made up his mind that he wanted to be a tail gunner in an airplane. And he had to go for the test, and it was picked up. They realized that he was partially deaf. And the examining officer said, how in the, shall I say that?
Yes.
How in the hell did you get in the armed services? And he says, I lip read. And then the officer was quiet for a minute, and he says, if you have fooled them, I'm not going to say anything. And he got in, and I have a picture and his airplane to prove it.
You told me also, but I'd like you to repeat, that he was very short, and that was a problem. He didn't think he'd get in, so what did he do?
You want me to repeat
yes.
that?
Yes, please.
He had wanted to enlist, and he did try, and they refused him because he was too short. And somebody told him that if he would stay in bed for 24 hours and then get a friend or somebody to drive him to the enlistment station, that he would be lying on a bed of a truck, that he would elongate during this long sleep or this long bed rest, which he did, and he passed and got into the service. You don't believe that?
Oh, I do believe it, but that's an indication of how much people wanted to participate, that they would take special efforts to get in as opposed to keep.
And he was very much that way, and he was.
Were most of the boys that way? Would you say most of the people had that strong patriotism that they wanted to serve?
The young men that I knew, or that, that I had been involved with, they wanted to get into it. Yes.
And
just like the boys in your class.
Yes.
I think there were 4 that were very definitely interested in getting in.
And even to the extent of lying about their age sometimes.
I beg your pardon?
Even to the extent of lying about their age to get in.
That, I don't know. But some of them, would be between 17 and 18, wouldn't they?
Yes.
In your class?
Yes, yes.
At that time. When were you graduating, 46?
46. The war was just over, so if they in order to get in, they'd have to get in a year earlier. The war was still on in 45.
Maybe they did.
Yes, they did. But I think that you might comment on the degree of patriotism, that this was a unique experience. This was a war, a righteous war, would you say? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
the boys seemed to feel that it was something that they wanted to do.
how about their
And
parents?
especially Connie, I know that was definite, but he was older. He was older than the group from your class.
Yes. And I think, I may have asked you this before, your class followed the war as time went on, during the social studies period of time. Would you bring in newspapers or just talk about it? How'd you follow it?
And if you remember that in the social studies that we were studying England, do you remember?
Yes, sure.
And we had everything connected with England and how England was handling the war. If you don't remember it, I do, because I got bawled out for ruining the floor.
How'd you move the floor?
Because you kids had sandboxes and so on, and was building the transportation system and so on.
Oh, yes, I do remember it. Yeah.
Some of you boys climbed in the windows to get in the mornings before the school was open, really.
That's right, you were on the ground floor, I still remember the classroom. The, were there any special wartime memorials for graduates?
I beg your pardon?
Were there any special wartime memorials for graduates? In other words, as they graduated and left for the service?
I don't remember.
Did your church respond in any special way to the war?
Other than this, the only thing that seems to stick in my mind is the bandages.
How about related to deaths? How about related to those people that had family members that died, either fathers or
there was no
something?
doubt about that. That's natural, but I don't remember of any specific one from our church. I could find out, but
Did these people belong to any special organization together as a result of their loss? Remember?
I can't remember. And the group that I was mostly associated with was the Women's Guild. And if it had anything to do, maybe one of the members would have lost a member of the family or...
Was the Women's Guild a portion, a organization within your church?
The Women's Guild is
Part of the church?
association in the church.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be the only way that maybe would be if food was needed somewhere, or as I told you, the bandages, or maybe clothing, anything that the women could do.
Yes.
That they would, and I think all the churches did, contributed in a way like that. The women that couldn't do anything else, couldn't go out, take a job, and so on.
And
But
mostly related to making bandages and things of that nature?
and that's 50 years.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Do you recall any special sermons?
Sermons?
Sermons in
No.
the church. Do you recall either VE Day or VJ Day in Hastings? I know, was Hastings involved in celebrations or just down in Times Square?
No, not specifically, no. Everybody was very glad. That was June, what? What was the date?
I don't remember the date. I don't remember the dates. I should, but I don't. I can find out for you, though.
Somebody else will know.
Yes. Were there any special welcome home signs for the GIs when the war was over in Hastings? Do you recall any boats in the river related to celebrations of the war ending?
No.
Do you recall any special way your life changed as a result of the war ending?
Change in what?
How can you think of any special way your lifestyle changed as a result of the war ending? Did you continue your victory garden, for instance? Did you do anything special that you would not have done had it been for the war?
Yes, I took a leave of absence.
Right after the war?
Because I was pregnant.
Oh.
And Phyllis was born in 49. So I stayed out of school there for that while. So that changed my lifestyle.
But then you returned again. How about traveling? Did you immediately travel after the war? Did you take trips which you couldn't have taken during the war? Any trips? In other words, how did your life change as a result of the war ending? Think of any?
Well, we always did travel somehow, somewhere during the summer vacation because we were both teachers.
You're talking
Until
about during the war?
came.
Yeah.
And of course then we didn't travel.
Right.
And we may have started back
Traveling.
doing our summer vacation until...
Did you feel very deprived not being able to take your trips as a result of the war?
No.
Did you resent it?
No.
No, you just accepted this is what would be.
I always thought that these people that brag so much about it was not very patriotic.
What did the children do for vacations in the summer during the war? What kind of activities?
I don't know.
There weren't any summer camps operating during the war, I guess, were there?
I don't remember, Jerry.
Well, your summer camp did.
No.
What did the children do for swimming in Hastings during the war? Where did children go swimming if they wanted to during the war?
I don't know. There wasn't any place here in Hastings unless they swam down the river.
Which we did.
Hmm?
Which we did.
I think you did.
Yes, I swam down the river.
But there wasn't any place else in Hastings to swim, was there?
They dug a pond up where the parking lot
Was
is.
that what they called Sugar Pond?
I don't know. No, I didn't know if that had a name, but they had to close it down because we got urine and eye infections. The water flow coming down wasn't enough.
No, I don't remember anything like that.
Did you continue your garden after the war?
For some time, I did, and then I decided that was past me, and I can still see the shape of it. It never came back.
Oh, I hadn't asked you before. When you made your victory garden, did you actually take a portion of the lawn that you might not have used to enlarge your garden for the victory garden?
You mean the food?
In order to grow your victory garden, did you expand your garden larger than you might have because of the war?
I never had a garden.
Oh, so you planted it specifically for the war,
That
the
was,
vegetables?
I always had a lawn back there, but it's, it reaches back quite a distance from the house back. And there was a whole section in there that we dug up and made the victory garden. But we'd never had a garden before.
Oh, so that was in response to the war. How did Harold manage to get down to work? Did he get a special
He had a
type of?
carpool.
And
Because there were students living here in Hastings that went to that school.
What was the school? Riverdale? Fieldston, Riverdale?
Fieldston.
Fieldston.
School. And he would fill his car and drive down, and I don't know whether he got, I don't remember whether he got special privilege or extra gas, I don't remember.
Did they pool? Pooled. People got together. He didn't go down alone. He went down with other people.
He drove the car.
He drove the car.
The students.
How many students?
He filled his car. Must have been at least 4.
And did those families contribute gas ration stamps? Oh, okay, I was wondering.
They probably did,
So-
but I don't remember. That was not my, that was his.
Did he have any special feelings about being, Philston was in New York, in Riverdale?
Did he have one?
I'll go back. Where's Philston School? Where's
In
that?
Riverdale.
Riverdale. Were you concerned because he was closer to New York and more potentially greater hazard as a result of the war?
I don't remember anything he felt.
Or-
He always was disappointed that he couldn't have gotten in the service and been instrumental and helpful other than being a soldier.
Did he feel uncomfortable about not being able to be in uniform during the war? Did people ever make
Not that I know of.
nasty
He felt-
remarks? Did he worry in any way that people would look at him unfavorably because he wasn't in uniform? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember that, only he would just talk to me about it, that there was many people that he didn't think were any more qualified to go in the service than he, meaning there was a lot of civilians
Yes.
that were able to do things in the war situation that he could have done even with his eyesight,
Yes.
because it wasn't that bad. But he just helped wherever he could. But I don't remember if anybody ever saying anything to him about it. They just took it for granted that he was not able to see well enough to get in the service. But
How old was he during the war, beginning of the war? Approximately. Was he in his 30s, 40s?
that's what, 40 years ago?
42, we'll say.
42.
December 41, 42. Approximately.
Well, he was 1 year younger than I. Now, how old was I in 42, 43? 38? 38?
Yes, so same age as my mom, so let's see. You were born in 19...